Are you considering adding Kilkenny to your itinerary? If you are, this is a podcast episode you don't want to miss. Hi, thanks so much for joining me again here on the Traveling in Ireland podcast. Today we are taking a trip down to Kilkenny and having a few shenanigans along the way. But before we get into that, I just want to remind you, if you visit a place that you heard about on the podcast, be sure to let them know. This helps me to get more great guests on the show and share more terrific Ireland attractions and tips. So don't forget to be a name dropper. Just say, I heard you on the Traveling in Ireland podcast. So we're heading down to Kilkenny today, and Kilkenny is one of my favorite cities in Ireland. In fact, it's someplace that I recommend people visit more than Cork or Galway. I just think it holds a terrific sense of history and mystery. So I'm really excited to have with me today Nevin Cody, who is the creator of Shenanigans Walks, Misguided Tours of Kilkenny. Nevin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Jody. I'm so excited to be here to tell everybody all about our amazing city.
So when I'm in Kilkenny, I almost feel like I could enter one of those narrow alleyways and exit into another time. It just holds that sense of medieval so well. So I want to hear from you because I know what I think makes Kilkenny worth visiting, but why do you think that visitors to Ireland should add it to their itinerary?
Okay, well, first of all, we don't have long enough in this podcast for me to tell you all the things why I think people should come to Kilkenny. However, having that said, you're right about the medieval part. We're known as the medieval capital of Ireland, and every street, every corridor you turn around, there's another door that opens up with a story, with history, but also amazing people who are still working there in stores and bars and restaurants. So that it's a living city, even though we have the medieval part to it. And it's a beautifully warm city and safe city for people to go through. And there's an energy here. We call it, there's an Irish word called finniv, which means energy. There's an energy to the city, which is what I want to really expose when we're doing our tours. And there's just that sense of mystery, that charm, sense of security. And then there's just that history and the storytelling that goes with all of that. So we've so much to offer. You called me a misguided tour. We say we're not just a guided tour, a misguided tour, because I want to capitalize on that sense of energy, that finniv, or spree as we call it, which is fun or sport, or a lot of people might know it as crack, having crack here in Ireland. And it's bringing all of those stories, all that history together in a fun and interactive way. So people are not just bored, with lots of facts and figures. We want to bring it to life. We want to bring the people who are here to life and hopefully meet some locals along the way. We often meet the local mayor around the way. We meet local bar owners or restaurant owners, and everybody has a wonderful word and a conversation. And it just feels like a family to people when they come here. And it's so popular that a lot of the Irish come here on holidays as well. They come here for the weekends. It's very popular for weddings. It's very popular for bachelor parties and hen parties. So it's not just international guests. The Irish coming here themselves have a wonderful time here as well.
And I think in that way, Kilkenny, I know when I first started visiting Kilkenny, it was almost quiet. And it definitely isn't that anymore.
Yeah, I think people have now discovered that not only is it a wonderful place to visit, but it's really easy to access. And we also have festivals all year round. We were known as the festival city. We had festivals 11 months of the year pre-COVID. They're not all back yet, but they're just about coming back. So there's something every month of the year for someone to come and visit. And I think the word is just out now. And it is a must-do, and a must-see and a must-stop site. And probably the biggest complaint that I would hear from guests all of the time is they haven't had enough time in Kilkenny. And that's usually what I hear from them. And I don't blame them because they hear about the medieval part like you were describing, the medieval streets, but there is so much to discover here. There's wonderful shopping here. There's lots of independent stores. We don't have a lot of those multinationals here. There's a lot of owner-owned businesses still in the town. The same with cafes and restaurants and bars. There's lots of music and lots of great fun, but there's so many other landmarks to visit. Like there's places like Roath House, the only medieval house that's left complete in the whole of the island of Ireland. St. Canice's Cathedral and Round Tower, the monastic Round Tower. It's It's one of only 3 in the world, only one of only 2 in Ireland. You can still climb to the top of all the way back from the 900s. We got the Smittix experience for anyone into that side of things. And we've got a story to counteract that Guinness story here in Kilkenny. And anyone who does Guinness and Smittix always say the Smittix experience is a better experience. It's a more intimate experience here. So, and we got the famous and the majestic, and you will know this from being here at Kilkenny Castle. And that's a must-see. And again, that has a wonderful energy about it. It's not one of those harsh castles with the square walls. It's a beautiful castle that sits on top of the hill overlooking the city. And with the castle at one end and the cathedral around there at the other end, we call ourselves a city, but it's really a very compact space here that's literally 15 minutes from tail to tail. And everybody can move around safely. They can go to see everything at their own leisurely pace and don't need to have taxis or cars or trains or anything like that. Once you're here, you're right in the heart of the city every day. That's what makes Kilkenny so special, I think.
Well, and, speaking of Kilkenny Castle, I guess when I'm talking to people about castles, because there are castles all over Ireland, but the thing about Kilkenny Castle is I think it's the only one to me that feels palatial. Like you said, it's not the stark square walls, and it's a different castle than any other you're going to visit across the country.
Yeah. And the great thing for us is, even though it had got into a lot of decline right up until the 1960s, it was sold back to the city, to a restoration committee here for just £50. And then they handed it over to the state in 1969, who have now brought it back to how it would have looked when the Butler family were living there. A very famous family here. And you would hear lots of stories about them in the city here as well. And it is very complete. They've even brought back the old wallpaper, the old carpets. They were able to find samples. They found the original producers still in the UK that were able to bring those things back to life. And there's a history that goes back, though, before even that period that we visit inside, because we go back to people like Strongbow, who people may have heard of, and he was the Earl of Pembroke. And then we also had a person called William Marshall, who's to this day is still known as the greatest knight who ever lived. So there's a legacy there of a story that is just an interesting tell and has a lot of connections to other parts of the city. But to go around the castle today, you really get a sense of how people lived, how life was for the rich compared to what it would have been for the poor. And you get to see some of the changes that happened throughout the centuries, even a little bit of central heating in there with some pipes going through it that were added at a later date, and the Long Hall, which is the picture gallery. And of course, back then, that was the TV of its day. People didn't have televisions, so they used paintings to draw people's attention. They used architecture, the amazing stairs that's in there, the Turkish-style stairs. And again, this was all to keep people interested when they were visiting the castle. And, interesting things for me is the bedroom windows always faced the city. And that was so any guests would be able to oversee everything that the butlers purveyed over. And there's an interesting archaeological day going on as well, where they found the original main gate there. And there's more work to come on that. And that's been a fascinating story that's just slowly now revealing itself to tell us more. And then across the street, we have the old stables of the castle. And again, they had been not used for a long period of time as stables. But then in 1963, a guy called William Walsh wanted to reinvigorate Irish craft and design. And he saw an opportunity. They did a big report as it happened, and Irish craft and design had gone into, really poor design. A lot of people had emigrated. There was lots of people after the famine had died, 2 world wars. So it got into a lot of decline. So they wanted to reinvigorate it again. So they created the National Design and Craft Yard. And many people around the country, nowadays may not have trained there, but probably trained from somebody who originally would have trained in this castle yard to reinvigorate craft and design in Ireland. And to this day, there's still an amazing array of craft makers. In fact, we do a craft makers tour in there. The 2 silversmiths, if anyone has heard of the Gaelic sports of Gaelic football and hurling, which, by the way, hurling is our main sport in Kilkenny, and we're the best at playing it. We're called the Kilkenny Cats, and we've won 36 of the national titles. But there's 2 finals every year called an All Ireland, which is like a Super Bowl, so to speak. And the 2 finals, the cups were made by the 2 silversmiths in the castle yard here in Kilkenny. But we also have soap makers, candle makers, leathersmiths, sewers in there. And there's a new knife maker in there as well. And he has an amazing story, having had a bad accident, started making jewellery, now making knives, and has just been accepted into the American Guild of Craft Makers. And not only that, he also had a big article just written recently about him in the New York Times. And the Japanese are now bringing him over later this year to show off his work over there. So the talent of all the people in there, and every one of them, from the soap maker to calamari, have really interesting stories, how they've dealt with cancerous patients, how they've led to creating the products that they've created today. And then just beyond that, you're into the Butler House, which was a dower house. It was a granny flat for one of the Earl's mothers, as it happens, one of the butlers, Eleanor Butler. And there's a beautiful little garden there, and that's a beautiful space to go for afternoon tea as well. And, that's all within 3 or 4 minutes of itself. And there's an amazing store of the Kilkenny design shop as well. So that castle, you're right, it really does hold something more than a lot of the other buildings around the country do.
And another, we just kind of talked about the castle and crafters and things like that. There is an amazing Saturday market held right there at the castle during spring, summer, fall. And gosh, if you want to talk to people, that's the place to go.
But not just Saturdays, Jody. On Thursday, all year round, it's there. And on Saturdays during the summer months. Yeah, it was there today. Saturday. Amazing food. Arts and crafts bakers are there. The locals shop there for their breads, their cookies, their meats, their fishes, and so forth. And then you often, this time of year in particular, you'll have buskers there. So there's a real atmosphere to the place. And it just brightens up the whole, in the shadow of the castle, this array of colour that arrives here on a Thursday and Saturday. And it just is an amazing experience. The food is incredible. All those food trucks that are there. Again, really popular with the locals as well. And it's a great place to hang out. It's a great place to people watch if that's what you like to do. And just have a drink or a bite to eat and just watch the world going by. And it's amazing to see the range of people that we have visiting the city here. And all, I would say, feeling exactly the same way about the city once they've come and experienced it.
Such a fun experience if you can be there for that. So now that we've kind of whet people's appetites for the city of Kilkenny, let's talk about the Shenanigans tours. Because I love the name. I think not only is it a very, Irish name for a tour, but having met you, well, you're the kind of guy that people would want to get into some shenanigans with, I have to say, Nevin.
Well, that's so lovely of you to say, Jody. And look, the tour, we start under that castle that we talked about, and we actually weave our way through the medieval streets and corridors. The tour, I built it with that energy that I talked about earlier on, but I wanted to design it for everybody of all ages and all interests, because I realize that not everybody is into the history and, the facts and the figures. Not everybody is into the stories or seeing the landmarks. So we have a blend of things in the tour which elevates the experience. So we have the stories, we have the history, we have that entertainment side of things where we have some magic effects on the tour as well. We tell the amazing story of the Smittix experience. We make a bottle of beer disappear, not the way you might and your listeners might like to make it disappear. Well, all for a bit of fun as we tell that story. We do a drug test about how we would have tested. We talk about things like, where did the word hangover come from? Phrases like chancing your arm, the high standing of society, or the upper crust of society. Where did all these phrases come from? And we explain a lot of these on the tour, and they've proved really interesting to some people. And the magic then is the entertainment. We even have a witches test. So we have a very famous witch in Kilkenny, and people have to decide whether she was a witch or not. But there is an interesting story that's told. It's 700 years ago this year. So there's a lot of celebrations starting to take place now to celebrate right up until November this year. And it's a story of a lady called Alice Kittler who disappeared. And was she a witch? And wasn't she? She was accused of killing all of her husbands by a bishop, Bishop Ledred. So that whole story, it's like going to Hollywood and it's all coming together. And then the wrong person got burnt at the stake. And this was all 300 years before the Salem witch trials. But on our tour, we even go and test one of the people to see if they're a witch. It's all, again, for a bit of fun. And I think it's just to make sure, I don't care where anybody goes. It doesn't really matter what people say or what people do. It's how you make people feel. And that's what I want people to get. I want them to have that feeling of what it's like to be an Irish person, what it's like to be in Ireland, what it's like life would have been in that period of time, what's life like now, and just create that spirit of Irish that many people know. But sometimes it takes them a little bit of a while to get used to our sense of humor and our sarcasm and so forth. But when you get into it, oh boy, do you guys get into it. And it's a great source of material for me when people come back at me with jokes and material as well. But most important for me is I see it as an introduction to the city. I am part of the story, but I'm the introduction to the story. And this is why I think many people say they haven't had enough time here, because I like to think that we inspired them on the tour to want to dig deeper, to want to scrape a little bit further down into that dirt and hear those stories of that bishop or of that witch or of the Smithick story or the family who live in Road House. We've even got a famous pub called A Hole in the Wall. And why was it called A Hole in the Wall? It was so famous, there was even a poem written about it. If you ever come to Kilkenny, go to the Hole in the Wall, where you get blind drunk for a penny and tipsy for nothing at all. And we have an amazing story around that and why it was called that as well. So that's what Shenanigans is about. We also would entertain kids if they're on the tour. We make sure that they're entertained. And when they're coming out, we have some kids packs that people can buy if they so wish as well, and to have a little memento to take away. We have the craft maker experience, which you talk about as well. If people are into a little bit of gamification, we also have a mobile puzzle tour. And this is where people use the streetscape to solve riddles. And then that opens up the story of the city and it drags them through that medieval route that I was talking about. And they can stop at any time and pause it and have a break and a drink. And there's lots of suggestions of places to stop for a drink or a bite to eat and so forth. And of course, we can always help people like yourself build out packages. If people want to build in other experiences or book restaurants and so forth, we can always help with that. The more we can do to help people have a wonderful time in Kilkenny and just join all of those dots to alleviate some of the pain that sometimes people have, that they come to a place, they're a bit unfamiliar, they're a bit nervous maybe on occasion and not sure where to go. Is it safe to walk around in the evening time? And all of those things. And we can show them how lovely Kilkenny is. It's a beautiful city. It's always full of flowers. It's always full of really happy people because it's such a wonderful place to live. But everybody that you're going to meet will want to help a tourist. And you'll probably find this, that if you stopped on the street with a map in your hand, somebody, even some of the youngsters from the schools will come up and say, are you okay? Do you need some help? Because we are really passionate about our city and we want people to explore the city and really become part of our city. From Shenanigans, you become part of the Shenanigans tribe. And we have a lot of tribal members now at this stage, and we have a bit of fun. We have a Celtic cry as we go around as well. We use that to scare off enemies or welcome home people, new friends. Sometimes we have people from the day before who shout shenanigans at us as we're going around. We also use it to scare off people who haven't paid as well. So that's all a bit important sometimes too. Yeah, so that's kind of a real synopsis version. And look, we've won loads of awards. Probably my proudest moment was when we won the TripAdvisor Traveller Choice Award back in 2021. It was the best thing in Ireland to do, and I was in the top 1% worldwide. And, I'm very passionate about everything I'm talking about here, but customer service is at our core. And we are a customer service business. And, we always build in extra time at the end of a tour. It's not like, tour's over, folks, see you now. We build in time to stay back. If we need people to walk them back to a driver or back to the castle or help them navigate themselves through the streets. Or if someone even tells us in advance that they're, looking for a particular item to buy, maybe a Tara brooch or something else, if we know in advance, we can check out a few of the stores. So rather than them having to go around 10 stores around the city, we might be able to narrow it down to one or two. They still mightn't get what they're looking for, but at least it will save them some time and they can spend that time doing something else that's fun or going for a coffee or whatever they might want to do.
So I know that your walking tours are fun and entertaining, but I have to say the puzzle tour is a really nice addition because it's sent to a mobile phone and then it's almost a gamified tour. Is that a good way to kind of say it?
Yeah, that's it. It's done on a timeline. I partner with a company over in Maastricht, and they have multiples of these around different parts of Europe. So when people book this through us, they log in with the code. It's on their mobile phone, and it'll start with a little bit of story, welcome to Kilkenny. Then it'll have, here's your first riddle. We normally start off nice and light. And I would see this as a medium strength or medium difficulty type of tour. I'm working on a more difficult one for those who are really into the riddles and so forth. And really, it starts off at the castle. They solve a few riddles, but they have to explore the area to find the answers. And then the story opens up again. It leads them down to the next part of the journey with another riddle. And then they have to use the streetscape around them. And it could be something like a street name written backwards. They have to find out what that is. And then it might be turned right, but right might be spelled out in numbers rather than letters and so forth. And again, you have to figure that out, use your brain. But you can also ask for clues. So if it's not something you're getting too easy, you can press for a clue, but you do lose some time. So it's based on the quickest time.
It's almost like an escape room, but you're not locked in.
Yes. Yeah. We're not going to lock you up anywhere unless you haven't paid. And then we might do that too.
No stocks for you. But I love that additional option that you offer. Because maybe some people are, not able to hit the afternoon tour, but they want to do something in the morning or later in the evening. I love this additional option that you offer.
Yeah, no, and look, it was really a COVID reaction at the time. I explored a few ways that we could promote the business and keep the business alive during COVID. So we started out with the locals obviously doing it, and now I've left it there because it did prove so popular. I do want to just mention something though, Jody. If people are coming to the city and there isn't a scheduled time that works for them, or they haven't booked a private tour with us, I always say reach out to us, because I really do hate people leaving the city and not having experienced the city. So if it's within my possibilities at all, if we can add them onto a tour, or if we can do something special for them later in the evening, it's not always possible, but sometimes I've done early morning tours with people as well, and we can make it a private tour, or we can turn it into a scheduled tour and see if other people want to book it. So pre-breakfast or pre-dinner or later in the evening, because I am aware that sometimes people, when they come to Kilkenny, it's often, the day they've arrived in Dublin. They want to get out of Dublin quickly. They might be a little bit jaded, want to go back to the room for a few hours and then come out afterwards. Please reach out, because if it's within my possibilities, I will take you out on a tour. We'll have fun. And even if it's a shorter version, it's all I can do. At least you will get the lay of the land of the city. So the following day, when you're going out to explore the city, or later that morning, if it's a pre-breakfast tour or post-breakfast tour, you'll be able to decide, okay, you know what, the castle is good, but I'm going to be staying in the castle next week. So maybe I want to go and do Roadhouse or climb that tower, do Smittix, and plan out your time for when you're in Kilkenny. So, and I would always say to people, whether it's Shenanigans or not, always do a walking tour with a local guide, because it's a great introduction to an area, and you will hear and see those hidden areas and stories that people just don't read about in the guidebooks and never hear about them at all. And that's what I think makes our tour special. It's all local guides, predominantly me, but I do have other people who work with me at the moment. So yeah, so I hope that kind of answers that for you.
That's terrific. And it really is those stories that make the impact when people visit someplace. It's one thing to read it on a sign or read it in a book, but to hear it told and explained, makes it different.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I mean, starting at the castle and the tour, we talk about that guy, William Marshall, we talk about Strongbow. Then we work our way up to the Butler family. But then the Butler family, one of the people who were born in the castle was the great-grandmother or the grandmother to Anne Boleyn. So Henry VIII's second wife and great-grandmother to Elizabeth I. So there's a whole load of connections there. There's the connections then with the Fitzgeralds. They had a battle with the Fitzgeralds of Kildare, which were the F in JFK. And there's a whole story about a phrase that we use called chance in your arm to this day. And we explain that phrase on the tour. And that comes from, you might call it sticking your neck out or pushing your luck. It's a phrase that's still used in Ireland to this day. And the story comes from a door with a hole in it that still exists to this day, that was chopped in it by a sword by one of the Fitzgeralds. And that door is still there that you can go and visit in St. Patrick's Cathedral in Dublin. It's called a Door of Reconciliation. And I tell all of that story on the tour. And I'm also not sure whether I'm really impressed that that door is still visible to this day with the hole in it, or that somebody didn't bother to fix it over all those centuries. I don't know which is worse.
So many great stories. So Nevin, tell people your website, how they can book a tour, and obviously where they can follow you for maybe more information.
Well, the walking tour site is Shenanigans Walk, so www.shenaniganswalks.ie. And if they could follow us on Instagram, Facebook, we'd really appreciate that. I'm trying to build up my following there. And we don't share too much. We're not going to bombard you with lots of stuff, but we do try to keep up to date with what's happening locally as well. So people are visiting here, we keep them up to date with what's happening. And that's going to change a little bit over the next couple of months as well. We have a few new little surprises coming up, which is about helping people have a better time when they come to Ireland, come to Kilkenny, with extra suggestions and extra ideas and other suggestions like parking and so forth. So they can book direct through the website. They can book through their agent, can often book through us directly as well. And I think, and again, beyond the tour, if there's something else that people need, I always say, send us an email, give us a phone call. And if there's something else that you're looking to do locally, but you're maybe struggling to get it booked, or you're not sure how to book it, let me know. If I can at all help with you, I'll help arrange that for you. We can help with tickets with the castle. The challenge with the castle is you can only book 7 days in advance, so it's a little bit difficult, but we'll help as best we can with all of that. So that's the website. There's also another side to Kilkenny, Jody, that I think we didn't get to touch on yet, which is the county of Kilkenny. And there's a few things I'd just love to mention if we have the time to mention it.
Well, now, are these going to fall under the 3 things that people shouldn't miss near Kilkenny? Because that question's coming.
Okay, well, let's wait for that question then. Yeah, okay, let's wait for that question.
It can start now, but I do want to say, just from personal experience, that you have been so helpful to me when there is something that I needed connection to in Kilkenny. You have just been so helpful to me with questions. And if you're going down the road of helping people more locally, I cannot recommend you enough.
Thank you, Jody. Well, that's what I'm all about. That's kind of my mission. The values are based around that for the business as well. And yes, I know I helped you out with something recently, and that wasn't an easy thing to get across the line, but it's going to be quite special for those people. And yeah, so look, that's what we're here to do. We're here to help one another. And, I'm somebody on the ground here, and I'm here to help the people who want to book, people like yourself, other agents that are not on this side of the water all of the time, but do know the lay of the land, but sometimes just need that extra support. But sometimes it's just something as simple as, where do I park? Make sure I don't get a ticket. Where can I go for the best bite to eat? Where can I go for the best pint? Where's there going to be music tonight? And, it's our job to know those things, and we can help people with that when they get to the city. And, yes, it's a 90-minute tour that they do with us, but I see it that goes far beyond that their time in Kilkenny is enhanced by what we deliver to them to be able to go and explore a more not sophisticated word, in a more calculated way, let's call it that they kind of say, hey, you know what, okay, we're going to do a brewery somewhere else, so let's skip the Smittix and let's do this other thing, or whatever it might be. I think they'd be sad to miss it. You know what I'm talking about, that it's, and then, sometimes people come and they say, you know what, we've got enough of the history stuff. Where can we go for a nice walk? And then it's kind of, okay, well, let me show you the river and the canal is, and this is the route I would take you. Or sometimes people are interested in just getting some energy back from some green and plants, and we've got all of that in Ireland. But Kilkenny is quite unique because we've got a couple of hidden gardens, the Roth House I spoke about, the Butler House, and Kilkenny Castle, the grounds of Kilkenny Castle here, and Lyrath Hotel, the Mount Juliet Estate. These are places that people can visit, that you can have that escape, but yet you're only a couple of minutes away from the city, and some of them you're right in that city. So I think we're really looking from that perspective. The only thing we don't have in Kilkenny is the sea. It's the only thing. And, that's okay. We're happy because we've got enough of everything else.
Kilkenny it's a wonderful city. It's a wonderful county. And going on that line to where you tried to go a few minutes ago, what would you say are 3 things that you shouldn't miss in or near Kilkenny?
I'm really upset that there's only 3. But there you go.
I know. So we could go on forever.
Yeah, we could. For me, I think I mentioned the Mount Juliet Estate, and in a triangle at Mount Juliet Estate, you have Jerpine Glass, and you have Jerpine Abbey, and you also have Jerpine Park. And I won't spoil the surprise with Jerpine Park, but it was an old medieval village. There's a very important person that comes around every year in December, that's in a big red suit, and one of the original versions of those was buried out there, and there's a whole story around that and how he ended up there. So that triangle, I see that as a one area. We've got the Kells Priory. It's the largest walled monastic priory going back to the 1200s, just outside Kilkenny, just a few miles outside town. And it's a site now that's been slowly being brought back to life a little bit. It's been resurrected, but it's a derelict site. But you can go in and walk around it. And there's a beautiful walk around through the village of Kells. And then you can come back through the King's Mill restaurant that's right in an old mill, right in that town there as well. So that would be number 2. And then number 3 for me is, I think you got to go to Graignamanagh. I don't know if you've ever been there, Jody, but Graignamanagh is just an amazing little village. There's some beautiful river walks. You can go on a boat on the river. You can do that in Kilkenny as well. There is wonderful walks up. You can do mountain walks as well. There's some local food and bars, but you also have Cushendale Mill. That is a woolen mill that is still operating like they operated over 100 years ago. It's a 3rd generation now. I think Miriam is the 3rd generation. Her father is still working there. They're still using equipment like they used it back then. The uniqueness of them is, in a lot of places in Ireland, the sheep's wool is sent abroad to be turned into yarn and then turned into products. They do everything on site in Cushendale. And to do an experience of a tour with Miriam and Trevor and seeing all the old machinery, how it works, and still operating to this day, and then have a wonderful store where they're selling their products as well. And they're in some of the top stores around the world with their products. So for me, that's one of the special things. And also down there, you can do a little walking tour that, again, it's on your mobile phone and brings around. And it's like, there's some really interesting stories to go with Greg the Manor as well, all going back to the ancient knights that were in that area as well. And if I could just sneak in a fourth one, which is on the other side of the city, which is Castle Comer Discovery Park. For those who are into a bit of adventure, there's zip wires. You can go into the river on boats. There's paragrams that you can climb up and all sorts of fun games that you can do. There's archery, there's hatchet throwing and all of that. So there are just a few things to mention. And I suppose I could keep going. But
Great things, though.
Yeah, like there's something there for everybody. And again, if people are looking for more ideas, they can always reach out. And again, I'll throw out a few today. And then, just not far beyond the county of Kilkenny, there's so much for. You've got the Rock of Cashel. I mean, people have got to see the Rock of Cashel, and the Cashel Palace Hotel there is now an amazing experience there. And, there's Carlow, there's Waterford, there's Wexford, there's Whitlow. They're all touching our county here, right here in Ireland's Edge of the East. And look, we could talk for this for a day if we had the time to cover it all.
And Kilkenny's so nice and central. I know that you can day trip to Waterford easily from Kilkenny. You can day trip to Glendalough from Kilkenny. It's a really nice central location. So I'm going to toss in a question that I only just now thought to ask. How many days should somebody spend in Kilkenny if they can? Because the one thing I hear a lot is they're like, we're going to go from Dublin to Killarney and we're going to stop in Kilkenny. And whenever I hear that, I'm like, you can't just make it a stop. It deserves way more than the hour or two that you're going to give it. But if somebody had the ability to kind of create their itinerary in a way that would utilize Kilkenny as a base and also give them time to really enjoy the city and those places that you mentioned around it, how long do you think people, let's say they're doing a 10-day tour, how long should they give to Kilkenny?
So I think if they had 3 or 4 days in Kilkenny, minimum spend a night, absolutely minimum, because so many people do exactly what you said. They're on the way to Killarney, they stop off in Kilkenny and they're just passing through. And, it's one of the challenges we have in the city that a lot of our visitors spend 60, 70 minutes here. And, you hear them going back to the coach and say, oh my goodness, like there's so much more to do here. So I think if you had a couple of days here, you have a day or two to explore Kilkenny. Then, as you said, you go down to places like Waterford Crystal, the Viking Triangle down there. You might even go down as far as Hook Lighthouse, the oldest operating lighthouse in the world, also built by our friend, the greatest knight, William Marshall. And there's a story around that piece as well. And if anyone have ever heard the phrase by hook or by crook, there's a connection there between the two of those. And then you can reach, as you said, to Glendalough, to Power's Court and Garden, all the way to Tipperary. And like, there's just such an easy reach. Everything is very close together. Rock of Cashel is quite close. So I think minimum 3 or 4 days. You have your evening times back in Kilkenny. You do a couple of afternoons in Kilkenny or mornings, afternoon, and then head out in the afternoon or go out in the morning and do those further trips and then work your way back into Kilkenny. And then after you've done your day one in Kilkenny, you can pick and choose which things you want to go back and visit in more detail in full, and then plan the rest of the week around that. And like you've already named a few of them there, the Greg the Manor I mentioned, in the county itself. You might just want to have a day in the country, go down to a beautiful village called Innistig, which has been loads of movies made there, and there's a beautiful parkland there called Woodstock. And you might want to do afternoon tea out in Mount Juliet or in one of the other local hotels. So I definitely think minimum 3 or 4 days, because when you go down to Kerry, you're going to have an amazing experience and you're going to, move through a lot of the areas. But I do think there's a lot to be seen in this region here. And yeah, that would be where I'm thinking about it. I think 3 or 4 days, because then it gives you 6 days to still get around the country. And if I only had one suggestion for people who are coming, and it's often when people ask me, is slow it down. Plan maybe to come back again a second time, because when you go to a bar to have a bite to eat, don't find a table in the corner. Try and even sit up at the bar. Talk to the local, who will then eventually introduce you to another local. And all of a sudden, you get to hear some of the stories or some of the suggestions of things to do locally that maybe you just hadn't discovered yet. If you're driving along a road and you see a sign, I don't know, it could be anything, sheepdog trials, or it could be selling, I don't know, potatoes and candle wax. And you're kind of, oh my God, how do you go from potatoes to candle wax? That's where you stop, you put in the car and say, hey, what's going on? And you'll meet what we call over here characters. You'll meet people who just have a sense of maybe fun, maybe a sense of mischief about them, maybe a sense of weirdness sometimes. But that's, all part of meeting Irish people as you go around. And I just think if you just slow it down, and you don't have to do the full circle of Ireland in 10 days, spend a few days in each place, get to know a few locals, go back to the same bar 1 or 2 nights in a row, and you'll never know, you might be invited back to someone's house for a party, and the best experience that you will ever have will just come out of that experience. And that's where I think when I plan holidays to go abroad myself now, have learned from that I don't want to do 1,000 things and 1,000 Instagram photographs. I want to have an experience of the place, of the people, the culture, and so forth. So when myself and my wife now plan, we tend to slow things down, and we spend a couple of nights in each place so that we can really just go and investigate. And if we find somewhere you like, it might be just a place where you got a cup of coffee and a lovely crepe or something, or an Irish scone, and we just go back there, 2 days, 3 days that we're in the area. Or maybe some days we've got a takeaway to take with us on our journey because we've enjoyed going back. And what I love about that, and I see it here in Kilkenny as well, but it happens across Ireland, is, you go in the second day, they're going to know your name. Where are you from? And we're curious people here. And, they'll give you a lovely welcome. They'll give you a nice wave, and you'll just feel part of the tribe. You'll feel part of the furniture when you're here. And I think that experience is such an escape for people. And it's not many places in the world you can get that, where there's a curious people, and it's not done in a threatening way. We just genuinely are curious about, where are you from? And they'll try and make a connection for you. You say, you know what? I have a neighbor, or I had a cousin who he went there and he flew there and he knew Jimmy Murphy. Do you know Jimmy Murphy? And you'll have a laugh about it and say, no. And then sometimes you might just find, actually, you know something? We actually do know the same person or the same family of people. And that's a connection. That's a memory that you'll take forward. You can take 1,000 photographs of mountains and lakes and rivers, and we do have an amazing place here. And I'm not trying to take from that. But if you can take that photograph and map it onto a story that you've had with a local at the side of that lake, or outside that pub, or outside that restaurant, or inside, that's a memory that you'll take with you. You'll hold that inside you much deeper than just a memory of a photograph. And that's what will want you to come back again. And you'll come back again and you'll have a similar experience. And, hopefully from our perspective, you tell other people to do the same.
Well, that's what's kept me coming back for 22 years, is that connection and the people, and just, the fabric, I guess, of Ireland. So perfect advice to end with, Nevin. Take it slow, take your time, and be curious, I guess.
Yeah. And have shenanigans along the way.
And have shenanigans.
Yeah, have fun, enjoy, play with people. We like that. We love when people engage with us in that way. And we call it banter over here. I don't know if that's a word you would use in the States, but we call it banter, good banter between people. And like I said, when you meet those locals, that's where the magic's going to happen. And that's what I'm trying to instill in my tours, is that sense of that magic that you can experience by approaching Ireland in a very different way than just it's another holiday. You are going to have the holiday experience. You're going to have that relaxation, but you're going to go home with a lot more. And you go to the sun, you come back with a tan. You come to Ireland, you come back with a memory that you'll just never, and a feeling that is hard to shake off. And that's why people do keep coming back again. And, I love being Irish. I love promoting Ireland, but I challenge people who haven't been here to come here. And, come with me. I'll show you around. We'll have great time, great fun, but I will absolutely do my best to instill that sense of curiosity in you. Be curious about Ireland when you come here. And as you said, the fabric is a great word, I think. The more you delve underneath that fabric, the more you lift up that curtain and look behind it, there is so much more than just what you know from the stories and from the history and the current history. There's a people here that have been here for millennia and millennia and millennia. This land has been here, for millions of years. And there's a history from when we were a forest, to the Irish people, to when the Celts arrived here in a couple of different waves, to when the Vikings were here, the Normans and the British, and that whole mix and match is still here to this day. And there's still a connection to all of those. And that is in every day, how we speak, how we act, how we treat one another, how we engage with visitors, all stems from that journey of 1,000 years, multiple thousands of years here.
Well, I'm going to say that if people didn't have Kilkenny on their list, I'm sure that they do after listening to this. Nevin, thank you so much for sharing your passion about Kilkenny and about Ireland with us. This was absolutely terrific.
Cool. Jody, it was an absolute pleasure. And I look forward to maybe some of your listeners coming and visit our Kilkenny. And like she said at the start, make sure you say where you heard about it or she'll be given out to you. Thanks, Jody.
Staying connected during your Ireland vacation is super important. Whether you need to keep in touch with family and friends, or you just want to share those amazing images that you've been taking in all the beautiful spots you visited. Every time I'm in Ireland, I use Wi-Fi candy. When I travel with my family or a group of people, I use the portable Wi-Fi device because you can hook up 10 different devices to it at one time. And when I travel solo, I order the eSIM, and that runs data so I can use any map or utilize my email or digital apps like Skype or WhatsApp to make phone calls. You can check out Wi-Fi Candy for connectivity during your trip at IrelandFamilyVacations.com/Wi-Fi, WIFI. And don't forget to use my exclusive code IFV2024 to save 10% on orders over €20. After listening to that, I don't think the question is, are you going to Kilkenny? But how long will you stay in Kilkenny? It was so much fun to record. And I hope you get a chance to visit Nevin and join his Shenanigans tour when you go. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a 5-star review at Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you can't leave a review on your podcast app, you can visit the Ireland Family Vacations Facebook page and leave a review there, or you can visit Trustpilot at IrelandFamilyVacations.com/trust and just say something nice for me. I really appreciate it. If you have questions or comments, you can email me, Jody, Jody, at IrelandFamilyVacations.com. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Until next time, slán go fóill.